Good day, boys and girls. We have an exciting lesson today on the Tainos, Kalinagos, and the Encomienda system. Our objectives for today are as follows. At the end of the lesson, guys, you should be able to locate the cradle land of the Tainos and Kalinagos. Describe the migration pattern of the Tainos and Kalinagos into the Caribbean. Identify the areas settled by the Tainos and Kalinagos in the Caribbean. Identify technology utilized by the Tainos and Kalinagos. Describe cultural practices among the Tainos and Kalinagos. And discuss the terms and effects of the Encomienda system. Who were the Amerindians? Who were the Tainos and the Kalinagos? They were originally from Asia. They started their migration from Asia, crossing over the ice bridge into Alaska, and from there they continued their journey into the Americas. They migrated through North America, South America, and entered the Caribbean. Once in the Caribbean, the Tainos occupied the Greater Antilles, the Bahamas. They were followed by the Kalinagos, who were always in pursuit of them, and the Kalinagos largely occupied the Lesser Antilles. Here are images of what the Tainos and Kalinagos would have looked like. They migrated in search of food and for better climate conditions. Here is a typical Taino village. As you can see here, everyone is cooperating. The Tainos pooled their resources together. They cooperated in their villages in order to survive. Women picked and wove cotton to make hammocks, baskets, and skirts worn by them. That is, the married women wore the skirts. They worked on the garden plots, and they made pottery from clay and also jewelry. The men cut down trees and used fire and made tools from stones. They did the hunting, the fishing, and built canoes. Here we have an image of what the cacique's house would look like. The bohio, it is slightly different in shape from the family house, and this is where the cacique would live. It was the largest house in the village. Here is a close-up look of the Taino family house called Kane. The cacique would live in a larger rectangular house known as a bohio. Let us take a look at the Kalinago village. This is what a typical Kalinago village would look like, and as you can see, the material that is used to make the houses are similar to that which the Tainos would use: the thatch, the posts, dried leaves, and they would be fastened together to provide shelter. The men lived in the cabe. The men lived and slept separately from the women. Here is an image of the Carbe, the male dwelling house of the Kalinagos, otherwise known as the Caribs. Even though they were living in separate areas for the most part, the Tainos and Kalinagos shared similarities in their culture to some aspect. The Tainos were fishermen and they hunted and gathered food. So were the Kalinagos. They were also fisher folks and they hunted and gathered food, but they did not do much farming because they were semi-nomadic, meaning they walked around and moved around from place to place, raiding Taino settlements, etc. So they were not really that settled to do much farming. The Tainos were peaceful and friendly, while the Kalinagos were aggressive and warlike. The Tainos used the stones and other material from their environment to make weapons and tools, and so did the Kalinagos. The leader of the Tainos was a cacique. He was also the religious leader. He was assisted by men known as Metanos, as well as headmen. The Kalinagos had two main leaders, the Abauta and the Tibitili-Hoth. The Abauta was the leader in times of war, and the Tibitili-Hoth was the leader in times of peace. What was the diet of the Tainos like? The diet of the Tainos consisted of sweet potatoes, beans, peanuts, corn, maize, cashew. They had lots of fruits. These included pineapples, star apples, naseberries, and guavas, and they ate a wide range of seafood. The Kalinagos ate much of what the Tainos ate, but they did not like turtles nor pigs. Let us now take a look at the Europeans who came all the way into the Caribbean region and came upon the Tainos and later came in contact with the Kalinagos as well. These Europeans came from Spain, headed by Christopher Columbus, who was really from Italy by birth. The King and Queen of Spain, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, sponsored Christopher Columbus's voyage. Now, why would the King and Queen of Spain sponsor a voyage? First and foremost, they wanted to find a sea route to go all the way to the Far East, which would have been China, India, the Spice Islands, in order to acquire silk, tea, spices, luxury goods that they needed in Europe. Christopher Columbus also wanted to prove that the earth was spherical in shape and not flat, as many persons in Europe thought at that time. Spain also wanted gold and fame. So Christopher Columbus decided that he could find the sea route to the Far East for Spain by traveling west. The Spaniards, like many other Europeans, could not utilize a land route as they would encounter the Muslims with whom they were at war. When Columbus left Spain and sailed west, he ended up venturing into the Caribbean. He had no idea that he was in the Caribbean. He saw the Indians and thought they were Indians from India, not knowing that they were Indians living in the Caribbean, and this was actually the Caribbean and not India. Christopher Columbus also wanted to spread Christianity, as he was a European and Europeans were Christians, and felt that it was their responsibility to Christianize any group of persons. By 1492, Christopher Columbus sighted land on Watling Island in the Caribbean, and this was the beginning of a new way of life for the Tainos. Their world would change forever. How did the lives of the Tainos change with the arrival of the Spaniards? They were forced to mine for gold and work for the Spaniards under a labor contract known as the Encomienda system. According to that contract, persons who they were forced to work for, that's the Tainos, were called encomenderos, and these encomenderos could get labor from the Tainos in return for being Christianized. The treatment was harsh. The Spaniards brought horses, and the Tainos were terrified of the horses, and they trampled their garden plots, and many of the Tainos starved. They were overworked and abused physically. Many Tainos died from overwork, abuse, starvation, and diseases that the Spaniards brought to their region that they were not immune to. These diseases included measles, smallpox, influenza, chickenpox, and mumps. The Tainos were terrified. Many of them resorted to open combat, fighting the Spaniards and hiding in the hills. Some ended their lives by committing suicide, genocide, infanticide. The Spaniards did not bring any women with them on their voyage and often took away the Taino women. The Taino men and women resented this, and it brought a lot of conflict, and they did not accept the children that they had for the Spaniards. They often committed infanticide. The Spanish crown finally called an end to the Encomienda system in 1721. This labor contract that was abused by the Spaniards. Now, the Spaniards did not get an opportunity to place the Kalinagos under the Encomienda system, as they were not friendly, and they often stayed away from the Kalinagos territories, as they thought that they were flesh eaters, they were cannibals. That's what they thought. So they did not venture around the Kalinagos. So the Kalinagos were spared from the Encomienda system because they did not welcome the Spaniards. But by the time the Encomienda system came to an end, many Tainos had already perished due to harsh treatment and the diseases that were brought on by the Spaniards to their region. We have now come to the end of our lesson. I hope you have learned much about the Tainos, the Kalinagos, and the Encomienda system. Thank you.